Not sleeping at night absolutely sucks. Everybody hates it. Everybody's afraid of it. But what happens when occasional sleeplessness turns into full-blown chronic insomnia? My name is Maggie, and one of the things I talk about on this channel is how to recover from chronic symptoms. I struggled with chronic insomnia for 20 years. It got so bad in the fall of 2023 that I ended up having to be admitted into an inpatient psychiatric facility. So trust me, I know about not sleeping. And in this video, I'm going to tell you about the single shift that healed my chronic insomnia for good. If you struggle with chronic symptoms or you have nervous system issues that you've been trying to get to the bottom of, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And before we get into it, I want you to drop in the comments how long you've been struggling with sleep. I literally want to know, because I had insomnia for 20 years on and off, and I tried everything. And it wasn't a perfect sleep routine or a supplement or some type of special somatic therapy or something that helped me sleep better. And trust me, I tried all of that. I was the girl who was like, where's my noise machine? Where's my fan? Where's my blackout blinds? Where's my essential oils? Where's my antihistamine? Where is my prescription sleep med, the trazodone, the Ambien? You guys, I've tried it all. I literally took something to help me sleep for 15 years. Like, as long as my husband had known me, I was taking something to help me sleep. I no longer take anything to help me sleep. So in this video, I want to talk about like what the actual issue was, because I spent a long time trying to focus on the insomnia being the issue, and that wasn't what ended up being the problem to solve. The first thing I had to realize is that everything I was doing to fix my insomnia was actually fueling it. And this is a pattern I see far too many people fall into. I had an alarm clock. I was checking my phone all of the time. I had an Oura ring that I wore for 4 years that I ended up having to take off for 6 months because I was an anxious insomniac, but the Oura ring is back on. But the reason this was such a toxic cycle for me is because I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would open my Oura ring and I would get the stats and I would try to figure out how much REM sleep did I get? How much deep sleep did I get? Why have I been up? How long have I been up? So in the middle of the night, I was trying to see where I was at. I was trying to monitor, and I was obsessing about my sleep and whether it was quality sleep and whether it was enough sleep. I had all these fears around sleep, which I think is so common for everybody, because it's like you need sleep to heal and you need sleep to recover and to reduce inflammation. If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to end up in a psychiatric hospital. So one of my, biggest fears did come true. And as someone who's on the other side of all of this now, I can promise you that it gets better. I have these vivid memories of the things that I was doing in the middle of the night to try to help with my insomnia, because I had all of the methods and the hacks and the hygiene tips and the perfect sleep routine. But I also did not know what to do in the middle of the night when I was awake. And I have memories of being in my closet and shaking my body out, trying to do this somatic shaking, of doing EFT in the middle of the night, of getting in the bath at 3 a.m. with essential oils, rubbing essential oils on my chest, doing breathing techniques, 4-7-8 breathing, box breathing. Make sure the exhale is longer than the inhale, which can be helpful if you're dealing with nervous system dysregulation. But when you're dealing with sensitization, it's kind of like a different beast. I remember another time where I was in our family playroom and I was just Googling. I was on Reddit. It was so early in the morning and I was terrified, but I just wanted an answer. And unfortunately, it got me into this loop of bracing, of scanning for danger, of looking for a solution or trying a tool, and ending up just creating more and more fear, to the point where it got to a place where every day at 3 p.m., I started to panic, like to melt down, because, and this is something I've heard from a lot of people, you feel very alone. You feel very isolated. And I used to tell my husband, like, I don't get a break from this. At the time that my insomnia hit its peak, I was also dealing with chronic pain that no medical professional could help me with. I told my husband, I don't get a break from this. I'm freaking the hell out all day and I'm not sleeping at night. It is 24/7, no breaks. I don't ever get a reprieve from this. It's constant. And I got really hopeless because I felt like I had tried everything. I had tried everything that was recommended for sleep hygiene and getting good sleep. And then I had also tried everything for nervous system regulation, thinking, oh, it's my dysregulated nervous system that's preventing me from sleep. But I was wrong about that. The real problem was the fear loop. The fear loop that I was stuck in was what was keeping me from getting sleep. Something that I've seen as a common pattern is we can have an experience once or for a set period of time. A good example with sleep is that you don't sleep for 3 days. And then all of a sudden, 100% of your focus becomes, oh my gosh, I can't do this forever. And we start obsessing and becoming locked in this fear loop about our sleep. Another thing I see is that people have a panic attack. They have one panic attack and their entire life after that becomes trying to avoid panic attacks. And they are now living in chronic panic. So it's so protective that we want to prevent ourselves from experiencing this thing, but our obsession with not experiencing it is what actually locks it in place and perpetuates it. I want to very clearly discuss the difference between not sleeping and being terrified of not sleeping, because there is a difference here. It's one thing to be awake, and we have so much attached to being awake and why we're not supposed to be awake and how we have work or we have a meeting in the morning or we have to take care of our kids and I can't do this forever. All of that meaning around a circumstance of I'm not sleeping right now. I'm awake right now. And we pile on that story. But being awake is not scary without the really scary story we have about it. And so it gets to a point where this isn't as simple as I'm just not sleeping. It's that, yeah, I'm not sleeping, but I am also really terrified about the fact that I'm not sleeping and about the fact that I'm awake right now. And it is hard. It's hard if you have a partner and you watch them just blissfully go right to sleep. You watch your kids blissfully go right to sleep. That was one of the hardest things for me. I felt like everyone else was somewhere else because they were all asleep. And I was here alone, dealing with my fearful thoughts, dealing with my future casting of why this is the worst thing that could happen and how it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and how I can't go on like this if it doesn't change. That's a really scary place to be. But that scary place to be isn't the you that's in your bed. The scary place to be is the you that's in your bed looping on all these terrible thoughts and ideas about what it means to be awake right now. Coincidentally, it wasn't me who came upon a Reddit thread, but it was my husband. And he sent me this Reddit thread that was basically saying, hey, if you have insomnia, you don't have an insomnia problem. You actually have an anxiety problem. Now this was my other bread and butter. I have had anxiety for 20 years. My anxiety and my insomnia started at the same time. So to be able to understand that the reason why I was not sleeping was because this had moved from a place of insomnia and not sleeping to the fear of not sleeping and the anxiety that was looping when I was awake in the night. And so what looked like I have insomnia that's feeding anxiety was actually I have anxiety that's feeding insomnia, that's feeding anxiety, that's feeding insomnia. It became this big loop. I was so afraid of not sleeping that I was keeping myself from sleeping. So what was the shift that I had to make that shifted me from chronic insomnia to not dealing with that at all anymore? I had to shift into a state of allowing being awake. I had to become okay with the fact that I was awake in the night. I had to stop buying into this belief that I should be sleeping. Because listen, when you tell yourself I should be asleep right now and you're not, we're fighting reality a little bit. And we're painting out a safe situation as something that's highly dangerous. And I get it because there's a lot of fear mongering that goes into not having sleep. And the only other relationship I had to not sleeping was actually after I had my first son when I was dealing with really bad postpartum anxiety. Surprise, surprise. I now completely think that was due to nervous system sensitization. But at that time, I was not sleeping. I was hearing phantom noises. It was a really bad mental state for me to be in. So I had a bad connection to not sleeping because I feel like it kind of drove me crazy the first time and I didn't want to go back there. So I was even more amped when this happened in the fall of 2023. I just got so triggered and activated about it. Like, no, please don't let me go back there. And my refusal to go there was what kept making it worse and worse and worse. There are so many different things that are recommended out there, like getting out of your bed and going and do something else. I didn't do any of those things. I stayed in bed. I stopped looking at a clock. I allowed myself to be awake. If I was in bed and I noticed that I was not sleeping, I would tell myself, yeah, looks like I'm awake right now. That's it. I didn't try to talk myself out of it. I didn't try to talk myself down. I noticed what was happening and I went, yeah, I guess we're just resting. As I did that, something really shifted for me. I get questions about what about the adrenaline dumps? What do you do when you're just panicking at night when you're awake? You let yourself have the adrenaline dump. You work on your response to that. You work on your response to being awake and ditch the sleep trackers. If you are in the midst of chronic anxiety or chronic insomnia, ditch the sleep trackers. How you slept is none of your business. And as soon as I made that shift, I didn't worry about it. I didn't care. I didn't even let myself look at the data. It was not helpful at that point. My job at night was to rest. That was it. To be in my bed and to rest. You're spending all night asking yourself, what if I don't sleep? What if I don't get enough sleep? What if this keeps going on? What am I going to do? And I need you to shift from what ifing the worst case scenario to reminding yourself, even if you're going to be okay. I have to tell people this all the time. I understand you're not going to like it. I understand it's not what you would prefer. I hated it. It felt like it was torturous to me. But until I realized the way that I was engaging was keeping it torturous for me, I was stuck. And I had to realize that if I wanted anything to shift, I would have to stop playing into the loop. I was keeping the loop going. I know it feels like it's out of your control. I know it feels like it's happening for you. There has to be a pure acceptance that you aren't sleeping right now. This is not something that you can fake or that you can trick your brain into. It's something where you have to come to a place of acceptance that this is what we're dealing with. I can't force myself into sleep. Sleep is not something that can be forced. It is something that you have to allow to happen. And in my experience, I had to really get out of the way. I had to stop thinking that there was something that was going to shift it or fix it. And I had to realize that if I make the decision to feel something very scary in my head, like being awake when I wish I was sleeping and feeling all of this anxiety, I had to let that be there and then work on my response to it without an agenda, without needing anything to change. I needed to allow it to be there and to say, it is okay that this is here. And that's hard. It's so hard because I know that it's not okay to you right now. If you're watching this video, you've probably spent so much time panicking about the specific symptom. It's just a symptom that induces panic because we feel like if it's light outside, I should be awake. If it's dark outside, I should be sleeping. And if I'm not sleeping, this is a very serious problem or will lead to a very serious problem. Let me tell you, I have heard of the most severe cases of insomnia, other types of hospitalizations just because people had gone so long without sleeping. And these people have made a full recovery. It is the fear that keeps you from sleeping once it becomes chronic. It's not a chronic insomnia problem. It is a chronic fear and anxiety problem. And the shift for me was changing my response to one of acceptance and allowing and letting my insomnia work itself out. And your sleep will return, but not until you recover from the fear about your sleep. Have a little bit of fun with how you can kind of do this in a lighthearted way because it feels so serious and it feels like such a big problem. But I had fun with it at a certain point. I was just like, I don't know how I slept. That used to be a conversation I was having with so many people in my family every day. I was getting text messages. How did you sleep last night? I was meeting my husband in the morning after the night and he'd say, how did you sleep? And I'd say, how I slept was none of my business. Anyways, what's on the agenda for the day? It was something that was really important to me because as long as I was making this really terrifying thing that I was experiencing in my life, it wasn't changing. And I had a really interesting experience with one of my best friends, a friend that I've been friends with probably for as long as I've had anxiety and as long as I've had insomnia. She has been one of my best friends. And about a year after I went through my terrible insomnia and anxiety and chronic pain journey, her husband had reached out to me saying, hey, she's not sleeping and she's having some dark thoughts and it's a bad situation. And I talked to her and she was becoming borderline agoraphobic. She was not sleeping at night. She was 30 weeks pregnant. She was up at night panicking. I would talk to her on FaceTime and she was pacing, worrying about nighttime. She was getting jolted out of her bed in the middle of the night with adrenaline dumps. And I told her exactly what I'm telling you right now. We had a couple conversations and I was straight up with her, right? Because I love her and I love you guys too if you're watching this. And I said, listen, you are the one who's going to have to snap yourself out of this. You can't keep going down these rabbit holes of the deepest fears of what will happen if you don't sleep. You can't stop avoiding your life and staying in your house all day. You have to start venturing out of the house. You have to start staying in your bed at night. When you can't sleep, you need to allow yourself to be awake without needing to change it. And you need to accept that you're in a period right now where you're not getting the sleep that you would like to get. And that if you want that to change, you have to change. You have to change your response to being awake. You have to respond with less fear. You have to respond with less panic and focus and fixing and attention. And guess what, guys? She's back to sleeping amazing now. She had a really good change. But what I noticed with her change, like I noticed with many people's change, is that her fear went first. It wasn't an instant, here's your sleep back. It was, she stopped fearing it. She took my advice because she trusted me and she knew that I had been through it. And she was able to work through it a hell of a lot faster than I was able to. And so it's a blessing for me to be able to share my story and to be able to help anybody who's struggling with chronic insomnia, chronic anxiety, chronic pain symptoms, because I went through my own personal hell trying to get through it. And I didn't like a simple answer. And it was the simple answer that freed me from it. That was the shift I needed to make with my symptoms, especially the symptom of insomnia. It was one of my first symptoms to go. I want you to always remember your body knows how to sleep. Even if it feels like it is forgotten, it knows how to sleep. But at this point, if it has become chronic, it is your anxiety about not sleeping that is in the way. And I like to say I got a 2-for-1 deal because as I dealt with the anxiety about the insomnia and the anxiety about anxiety, both of those symptoms left the quickest. And I sleep amazingly now. I actually sleep with my French bulldog, Birdie, and my husband, of course, but I love being able to cuddle with my dog and not feel like anyone getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night is going to have me up, waking up for hours. It was a stress on me. It was a stress on my husband. It was a stress on our family. I know how hard it is, but I promise if you address the fear about not sleeping and you move into that place of allowing and knowing this is an anxiety issue, not an insomnia issue, you will be sleeping. You just have to put in the work here. All right, we'll see you guys next week.